Divorce rape is not a weasel word used for hyperbolic reasons. Divorce rape is a real phenomenon, and it's a crime perpetrated by the state against men with trivial exceptions. Let's explore. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Now, in my video about demographics, I said that there are several factors that usually do decide whether a population breeds more or less, and I said then that economic well-being is one of them. But it's not the only factor, not even by a long shot. The propensity of a society to practice divorce rape is also a factor, and quite a relevant one, I might add. Now, I don't usually cover such cases on this channel, as I usually bring these on my podcast over at AVFM, but let's read a bit from this one as a case study. So the Daily Mail titles, NHS Doctor 39 claims divorce judges made him work a 7-day week so he can continue paying £1,600 per month to his buy-to-let tycoon ex-wife. And let's read some excerpts. Quote, Hospital obstetrician Mark Tattersall, 39, claimed he was forced to work a 56-hour week after he was ordered to pay his ex, Amanda Tattersall, £1,070 a month in personal maintenance and almost £600 a month in child maintenance. When the pair split up in 2011, after more a decade of marriage, the editing standards are really low, Oxford University academic Mrs. Tattersall was handed 70% of the family fortune, the bulk of which was invested in a string of buy-to-let properties stretching from London to Liverpool. Dr. Tattersall, who is from Bolton and works at Liverpool Women's Hospital, says he has no choice but to work the equivalent as 7-8-hour days in order to meet his own basic needs and keep up the payments to his former wife. He claimed divorce judges were wrong to expect him to work more than a normal 40 hours a week, and has now told London's appeal court he feels he has been the victim of unfair treatment. Mrs. Tattersall studied physiological sciences at St. Hilda's College, Oxford, and worked at Cambridge University as a researcher before taking up her current position at Oxford University. The couple had a child together but separated in 2011 after accumulating properties in Loughborough Park, Brixton and St. Aldate's, Oxford, as well as Cambridge, Birmingham and Liverpool during their marriage, the equity in which was worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. The wife was handed 70% of the marital assets along with a maintenance order, which Dr. Tattersall claimed left him chained to the grindstone. Dr. Tattersall, who was earning £75,000 annually and working 56 hours, including weekends, before the separation, told judges he wanted to cut back his hours to 40 per week so that he had weekends free to potentially spend time with his young daughter. The divorce court ruling on maintenance had left him unable to do that, he insisted. The judge had overestimated his income and should have based herself on his current salary without overtime, he argued. He also claimed that what was left in his pay pocket after making the payments to his wife will not cover his income needs. The judge had been over-generous in assessing the wife's needs, he added. However, he has continued to protest and has been hit with further court orders over his failure to keep up the maintenance payments. Future payments were ordered to be rolled up into a lump sum and paid all at once by a family judge in March 2014. And the doctor was also hit with an enforcement order in relation to the arrears, which could potentially lead him to being jailed if he still fails to pay up. He is now fighting these orders, claiming to have suffered procedural unfairness and that his ex-wife has manipulated judges in order to get the results she wants. Now you tell me, would you get married knowing that this is very likely to happen to you? The more productive you are, the more likely you are to be hit by such outrageous rulings. In other words, marriage may be less damaging if you're way below the poverty line and your wife is slightly richer than you, but also in the extreme poverty sector. Though I wouldn't even vouch for that kind of arrangement either, judging by the crippling cases I've read in North America. And mind you, as crippling as this may sound, there are worse places in the world, such as India, where divorce rape is a term that is simply too mild in comparison to what is actually happening in divorce cases in the largest democracy in the world. Your 10 months old nephew and even your dog or your cat can spend time in jail if your ex-wife claims you require dowry from her or from her family. Quite frankly, I'm surprised that there are any new marriages at all in India. But let's leave India alone and get back to our continent. Cases like the one I've read are not the exception, they're the absolute norm, and not just in Britain or North America. Italy has similar cases, Poland, Switzerland, Croatia, Denmark, Spain, you name it. In fact, it's easier to list the countries that no longer have such cases, which are Iceland, Sweden, well, ish to a certain extent, though when it comes to seeing your child, Sweden is a terrible offender, but at least they won't rape your wealth. Germany, Romania, Hungary, Czech Republic, Portugal, and that's pretty much it. Basically, these countries are not special in any way, but there was an European Court of Human Rights decision around 10 years ago in a lawsuit filed by MRAs, by the way, against Germany, that pretty much said that everyone needs to change their family laws to be, well, less insane. And these 7 did change their family laws in the last 7 or 8 years and did make them, well, slightly less insane, though with the possible exception of Hungary, the changes didn't go far enough. But, well, that's a separate story. And also in Hungary, there's also feminist activism to change them back to insanity. We'll cover that in another video. So, under these conditions, is it any wonder that young men don't want anything to do at all with marriage, let alone breeding? I mean, seriously, why would you have a child, given that the child almost always belongs to the state, and if not, it always belongs to the mother? You have no control at all over your child's education. So please, tell me again, why should young men bother? The answer is that they shouldn't. And they aren't, and they won't anytime soon. In fact, they're making the rational choice of self-preservation, as Dr. Helen Smith would say, whose book I would recommend especially to those interested in demographic trends. The book is Amerocentric, but it applies to the T to Europe as well. Now, if you're really concerned about demographic trends, the issue of divorce rape should be right there in the top 3, because simply shaming youngsters for taking bullshit degrees, thus postponing family and work, which they do, and they shouldn't, no argument from me on that point, but simply shaming them for doing that will not solve the problem. In case you haven't noticed, the youngsters don't really give a shit. And they're not to blame. It's not their fault that building a house today costs 4 or 5 times more than it cost 30 years ago, even though construction materials are cheaper. It's not their fault that their parents voted in politicians who made the start in life impossible for a young man who's 17 or 18 in 2006 Anno Domini. I mean, thank goodness I was born earlier. Just as I said that most of my childhood is illegal now, so are most of my teen years and early adulthood. Now, it's easy to be Brad Wilcox, established careerist at a major university, and publish insane videos on YouTube called "Be a Man, Get Married." But it's a lot harder to be 18 today and noticing that you're more likely than not to be living in a jurisdiction where the false word of any woman can ruin a significant portion of your life. It's easy to be, 60-something and play the holier-than-thou card with things like, oh, well, back in my days, by the age of 23, I was already having 1 child and owning my home. But it's a lot harder to realize that when you were, 23, divorce rape was rare, or most of the time non-existent, and building a house did not incur additional costs worth another house in permits, certificates, and other bullshit regulations. But anyway, I'm digressing. So, to sum up, If you want to help change the current demographic trends in Europe, there's work to be done not just in addressing the mass immigration of culturally incompatible populations, but also in addressing systemic problems within our societies that predate the current crisis. As I said in the previous video about demographics, people respond to incentives. And the current system of incentives sucks, and sucks big time. It's not just that it disincentivizes having children, but it undermines what's left of the fabric of our nations. By furthering an adversarial relationship between the sexes, by fermenting an entitlement mentality in women, and by ruining the most productive members of the economy in the name of failed ideologies, all of these things are a lot worse and are significant factors in the negative demographic trends that anyone can observe. Just saying. And with that being said, thank you all for your continual support of this channel, and I guess I'll see you soon on Freedom Alternative.